What if I told you Lewis Hamilton's fiercest opponent this season isn't Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, or even Charles Leclerc, but Ferrari itself? Not the stopwatch, not the competition, but a cultural clash buried deep within Maranello's walls. 14 races in, the numbers are blunt. 0 podiums, not a single spray of champagne in red, while his teammate already has 5. The official story pleads for patience, for adaptation time, as if a 7-time world champion suddenly forgot how to drive. But insiders whisper something different, that Hamilton isn't being allowed to adapt at all. He's being asked to conform. And when you force a driver who built his legacy on precision, instinct, and unshakable confidence to unlearn what made him great, you don't just lose tenths of a second, you lose trust. Think about Hungary. Ferrari's golden boy starts on pole, looks dominant, but then fades. No clear explanation, only theories about tyre pressures and floor protection, quickly dismissed by experts as nonsense. Yet, when Hamilton's race pace falters, it's labelled failure. The message is clear. When Leclerc struggles, the car is to blame. When Hamilton struggles, it's Hamilton himself. That double standard matters because inside Ferrari, perception shapes protocol. Every podium for Leclerc reinforces the idea that the car should be built around him, while Hamilton's requests, sharper turn-in, more aggressive brake migration, adjustments to rear stability, are quietly resisted, sometimes approved in practice only to be undone overnight. That's not adaptation. That's politics disguised as engineering. And here's where it becomes dangerous. Formula One is built on data, on telemetry that doesn't lie. In back-to-back races at Spa and Hungary, Hamilton's stints revealed he could manage tyre degradation more effectively, even on compromised setups. At Emilia, he overtook Leclerc on track without DRS, pure instinct and pace. And yet those flashes of brilliance are treated as anomalies rather than warnings. Behind closed doors, Hamilton's patience is being tested, not by Verstappen's dominance or McLaren's rise, but by silence in his own garage. Remember Monaco? "Are you upset with me or something?" he asked over the radio. The response wasn't comfort or clarity, it was silence. That silence wasn't protocol, it was fracture. And fractures at Ferrari don't heal quietly, they explode. When Hamilton's Ferrari deal was announced, it was sold as the marriage of legacy and destiny. A 7-time champion joining the most storied team in Formula One, a driver synonymous with modern dominance, taking the wheel of the scarlet red machine that defined generations. For months, the narrative was simple. This was going to be Formula One's grand revival story. Ferrari would hand Hamilton the tools, Hamilton would bring the magic, and together they would chase glory at circuits where legends are carved. It sounded inevitable, but inevitability doesn't exist in this sport. Instead, what's emerged is a brutal reminder of Ferrari's identity crisis, a team caught between the past and the present, between loyalty to Leclerc and the necessity of change. The standings tell their own story. Leclerc sits consistently on the podium, racking up points that keep Ferrari in the Constructor's conversation. He's been the familiar face of stability, the driver fans in red can point to with pride. Hamilton, by contrast, has been portrayed as the struggling newcomer, a legend forced to relearn his craft. The PR spin leans on the word adaptation, as though a man who conquered every era of turbo-hybrid racing suddenly needs tutorials in tyre management or steering input. But to those who've watched closely, that narrative doesn't add up. Hamilton hasn't lost his edge. He's being boxed in by a system that still prioritises comfort zones over evolution. And that tension matters far beyond the driver standings. Ferrari has lived for decades with the myth of unity, the idea that red always comes before the individual. But unity cracks when results diverge. Every time Leclerc stands on the podium while Hamilton answers questions about patience, the divide grows sharper, fans see it, rivals sense it, and inside Maranello, whispers turn into battle lines. Because this isn't just about two drivers sharing a garage, it's about who Ferrari wants to be. A team defined by tradition and loyalty, or a team willing to bend for the kind of champion who doesn't wait for systems to catch up. That's the choice Ferrari faces, and right now, it's avoiding it. At the heart of Ferrari's internal battle lies a simple but brutal truth. Lewis Hamilton does not drive like Charles Leclerc. He never has, and he never will. Hamilton's career has been built on a sharp, aggressive style, late braking, heavy reliance on brake migration, and a demand for a responsive front end that allows him to position the car exactly where he wants it mid-corner. At Mercedes, this was not indulgence. It was the philosophy around which the car was developed for years. Ferrari, however, has spent half a decade refining the SF cars around Leclerc's smoother, more progressive style, flowing through the mid-corner with stability and patience rather than attacking the apex. The telemetry tells the story. During practice runs in Hungary, Hamilton consistently requested adjustments to differential preload and rear suspension dampers, trying to coax sharper turn-in. Yet the responses were either delayed or quietly reversed overnight. Insiders describe this as resistance by protocol, where changes outside the established Leclerc model are considered disruptions, not improvements. At Spa, Hamilton's requests for a more aggressive rear wing balance were initially granted, only for the setup to be rolled back before qualifying. The justification? Protecting rear tyre life. Yet the data from long runs showed Hamilton's degradation was actually better than Leclerc's on compromised fuel loads. This isn't adaptation, it's refusal to adapt. And in Formula One, refusing to adapt isn't neutrality, it's sabotage of opportunity. Because while Ferrari clings to tradition, the stopwatch is siding with Hamilton. Lap traces from Emilia show him not only matching, but surpassing Leclerc on entry and exit phases, when given even partial influence on setup. The engineers can call it non-protocol, but in pure numbers, it's performance. And when performance data is ignored for hierarchy, that's not just a technical limitation, it's a political statement. The clash doesn't stop with car setup, it bleeds into strategy. Take Hungary as a case study. Ferrari insisted post-race that tyre pressures were raised to protect the floor, sacrificing grip late in the race. Analysts like Gary Anderson called that nonsense, dismissing the idea that Ferrari would voluntarily throw away performance for protection. Yet the fact remains, Leclerc faded dramatically, while Hamilton, running a compromise strategy, showed stronger race pace over equivalent stints. The explanations never line up cleanly, and that inconsistency fuels suspicion. At Monaco, Hamilton's post-race radio message, "Are you upset with me or something?" cut deeper than it first appeared. Fred Vasseur tried to explain it away, claiming Ferrari has a no-talk policy in certain moments. But Hamilton's words weren't during a critical phase. They were after the flag. The silence from Riccardo Adami, his race engineer, wasn't protocol. It was fracture. In Formula One, communication is lifeline. Silence in that channel is either incompetence or a signal. And the signals Hamilton has been receiving, vague mid-race instructions, sarcasm about tea breaks in Miami, reluctance to explain strategy calls, suggest something more dangerous, an environment where his voice is diminished rather than amplified. Contrast that with Leclerc. When he questions a call, the answers come quickly, framed as collaborative. Hamilton's queries, in contrast, are often met with ambiguity. That double standard doesn't just shape perception in the paddock, it shapes decision-making in the garage. Because when one driver's struggles are explained away as mysteries, while another's are treated as failings, the balance of trust tilts dangerously. And in a team that demands absolute alignment, tilted trust becomes tactical paralysis. The radio tells the story, the press releases won't. Hamilton's relationship with Adami, the engineer meant to be his anchor, feels strained, almost transactional. In Miami, when Hamilton requested clearer information on gaps to rivals, the response was vague to the point of being useless, prompting his sarcastic, "Do you want me to stop for a tea break?" quip. These moments reveal not frustration at pace, but frustration at being left in the dark. And it's here the human drama takes centre stage. Hamilton did not join Ferrari to be a student, he joined to lead. But parts of the technical team, bound by years of loyalty to Leclerc, still treat him as an outsider, as though he must prove himself before his feedback carries weight. That dynamic is corrosive, not just because it stifles innovation, but because it erodes trust in the very relationship that makes performance possible. Drivers and engineers live in a bubble of feedback loops, coded language, and instinctive understanding. When that loop falters, so does confidence. For Hamilton, whose career has thrived on symbiotic trust with engineers like Bono at Mercedes, the silence from Ferrari isn't just unhelpful, it's alien. And yet, behind the tension lies a slow shift. Insiders note that Adami, once firmly viewed as a Leclerc loyalist, has begun pushing Hamilton's feedback harder in internal meetings, quietly, cautiously, but unmistakably. The more Hamilton demonstrates superior degradation management and sharper insights, the harder it becomes to sideline him. That subtle tilt, an engineer redistributing trust, is where revolutions begin. But revolutions are messy, especially when they threaten a golden boy. Because while Leclerc thrives under Ferrari's protective shell, Hamilton is reshaping it from within. And the question isn't just whether Hamilton can adapt, it's whether Ferrari can accept being changed by him. Numbers don't lie, and right now they paint a complicated picture. Leclerc's 5 podiums give Ferrari visibility, momentum, and headlines. But beneath the surface, Hamilton's race pace often tells a different story. At Spa, despite being underfueled in a setup not optimised for his style, Hamilton managed tyre degradation more efficiently, closing gaps that should have been unbridgeable. At Emilia, he overtook Leclerc on merit, without DRS, showing that when circumstances align, he still has the edge. The problem is consistency, not of Hamilton, but of Ferrari's willingness to let him drive his way. If Ferrari continues to split its philosophy, it risks leaving points on the table every weekend. Consider the constructors' stakes. Every podium left to Leclerc alone is valuable, but maximising both cars is what wins titles. Red Bull's dominance thrives on Verstappen's synergy with the car, but their constructors' supremacy has always been reinforced by the second seat scoring consistently. Ferrari, by contrast, is leaving one of the greatest drivers of all time underutilised. Project the numbers forward. Had Hamilton converted just 2 of his near misses into podiums, Ferrari would be breathing down McLaren's neck for second in the standings. That's the cost of politics disguised as patience. And with Monza looming, a race where points don't just matter, they echo through history. The stakes aren't just about pride. They're about survival in the constructors' fight, and about which driver Ferrari chooses to build its future around. The rest of the paddock isn't blind to Ferrari's fractures. Red Bull see it as validation of their stability. Verstappen's dominance underpinned by seamless integration between driver and engineer. McLaren, meanwhile, smell opportunity. Andrea Stella has openly emphasised the importance of driver-driven development, a philosophy that gives Piastri and Norris significant input into setup evolution. In a season where Ferrari debates hierarchy, McLaren are accelerating because they've embraced flexibility. Mercedes, too, are watching with quiet satisfaction. Toto Wolff has already hinted that Hamilton's decision to leave was brave, a subtle reminder that perhaps Ferrari underestimated the cultural adaptation required. Even Alpine, buried in midfield struggles, point to Ferrari's drama as evidence that resources mean nothing without cohesion. In the political theatre of Formula One, perception becomes weapon. Rivals whisper that Ferrari is becoming 2 teams disguised as one, and that narrative spreads faster than lap time data. Sponsors, media, and fans amplify it, creating pressure Ferrari cannot ignore. Because while Ferrari insists on patience, the grid moves on. And for Red Bull and McLaren, a divided Ferrari isn't just gossip, it's competitive advantage, a chance to capitalise while their rival wrestles itself from the inside out. Behind the curtain, Ferrari's engineering culture is shifting. Sources confirm that simulator programs now run Hamilton's preferred setups in parallel with Leclerc's, not as experiments, but as serious development paths. Torque delivery models. Hamilton requested months ago have been implemented with immediate gains in simulator output. These aren't concessions. They're acknowledgements that his feedback is generating performance. Yet the political balance remains delicate. Leclerc has reportedly requested oversight of setup changes, not to optimise them, but to monitor how the car is evolving away from his comfort zone. This signals a driver aware of his diminishing monopoly, trying to hold ground as Hamilton's influence grows. For the engineers, it's a tightrope. Ignore Hamilton, and you risk leaving performance untapped. Prioritise him, and you risk alienating the driver who has carried Ferrari's hopes for half a decade. The danger isn't a civil war, not yet, but an ideological split. And in Formula One, ideological splits have consequences. They bleed into strategy, pit wall decisions, and even development directions for next year's car. Monza isn't just another race in that context, it's Ferrari's mirror. At the Cathedral of Speed, with Tifosi watching every detail, Ferrari won't just be judged on lap times. They'll be judged on whether their 2 drivers are aligned or fractured, and whether Hamilton's quiet revolution is steering the Scuderia toward evolution or implosion. So it all comes to Monza. Ferrari's temple, its cathedral, its stage. A place where history echoes through the grandstands, and where every misstep feels louder than a blown engine. But this year, the question is not just whether Ferrari can deliver for the Tifosi, it's whether Ferrari knows who it is. On one side, Charles Leclerc, the loyal son, nurtured by Maranello, protected by hierarchy and rewarded with podiums. On the other, Lewis Hamilton, the outsider who arrived to lead, resisted at first, but now carving influence through undeniable data and sharper insights. Two philosophies, one car, one team, being pulled in two directions. The truth is, Ferrari cannot serve both masters forever. At some point, performance will force politics to yield, and when it does, the Scuderia will either emerge stronger for embracing change or weaker for clinging to tradition. Monza, then, is more than a home race. It's the battleground where Ferrari must choose between protecting comfort and pursuing greatness. The Tifosi don't care about internal hierarchies, they care about results. And results demand clarity. Hamilton's declaration of independence, his refusal to hide behind PR lines, his insistence on transparency, has already cracked Ferrari's wall of silence. The next step is whether that crack becomes a doorway or a fault line, because in Formula One, silence doesn't protect systems, it exposes them. And at Monza, under the weight of history and the roar of hundreds of thousands, Ferrari's silence will either break or it will bury them.